Imagine receiving a phone call from your sister. She tells you, "Be careful, there's a psychopath killer on the loose." You thank her warmly for her concern. You assure her you'll be safe. But during this entire conversation, you know something she doesn't. The psychopath killer she's talking about is you. Welcome to the disturbing world of Bryan Kohberger, the criminology student who went from studying serial killers to becoming one. "Because you are guilty?" the judge asked. "Yes," he answered. 4 murders, 4 lives taken in one night of absolute terror. Kaylee Gonsalves, 21 years old, full of life and ambition. Madison Mogan, 21, her inseparable best friend. Xana Kernodle, 20, loving and joyful. Ethan Chapin, 20, the devoted boyfriend in the wrong place at the wrong time. All brutally murdered on November 13th, 2022, in their off-campus home near the University of Idaho. But today, we're not just telling the story of a horrific crime. We're diving into the mystery of a man who lived a terrifying double life. His sister Melissa, who goes by Mel, has just broken 3 years of silence in an exclusive interview with the New York Times. For the first time since her brother's arrest, the Kohberger family is speaking publicly, and what she reveals raises more questions than it answers. How does a young man who conquered heroin addiction become a murderer? How does a PhD student who spent his days studying criminal minds cross over into horror? How does a loving sister who called her brother to warn him about danger end up talking to the danger itself? This is a story of manipulation, secrets, and a family torn between unconditional love and absolute horror.
She ran downstairs because she saw someone.
Between the brother they thought they knew and the monster he became. Buckle up, because this journey into a killer's mind will chill you to the bone. The night of November 13th, 2022 will forever be etched in history as one of Idaho's darkest.
She get an education. She came back in the box.
After more than 3 weeks with no arrests and no big breaks in the case, the father of one of the University of Idaho victims is shedding some light on the murders. Steve Gonsalves says between his daughter Kaylee and her best friend Maddie, one of them had injuries that were significantly more brutal.
In a white 3-story house on King Road in Moscow, Idaho, 4 young students sleep peacefully. They'd just spent a normal evening with friends, laughter, and carefree moments. None of them knew those hours would be their last. Between 3 and 4 a.m., a masked intruder enters the house. He carries a K-bar-style military knife, a weapon designed to kill efficiently. He climbs the stairs in total darkness. He knows exactly where he's going. Kaylee and Maddie are in a 3rd-floor bedroom, asleep in the same bed. They would never wake up. On the 2nd floor, Xana and Ethan are together in Xana's room. The killer finds them, attacks them with unimaginable brutality. The silence of the night is shattered by terrifying sounds. The details of that night are haunting. But before we reveal the chilling discovery Mel made just days before Christmas, I want to hear from you. In cases like this, do you believe the family should be held accountable for missing the signs? Drop a yes or no in the comments. I'll be hearting the most thought-provoking answers. One of the 2 surviving roommates, terrified in her room, hears someone crying.
They were in the main room. I heard them dancing and laughing. Kaylee went upstairs and she screamed because someone from the room. She ran downstairs. And I kept calling her name and she wouldn't answer. And then I saw the guy. I just locked the door and I ran downstairs. But we don't know what's going on. I heard her scream and she ran downstairs because she saw someone. That's what I'm pretty sure she said. Someone's here, and she screamed and just ran downstairs. And I called for her name, but I jumped up and locked my door because I was so scared. And then I heard someone in the bathroom, and I heard her crying, and I heard some guy say that you're going to be okay, I'm going to help you. And I kept calling her name, but she wasn't answering. And then I opened the door for a second, and I saw this guy, and he was not insanely tall, but he was wearing all black and like this mask, which is covering his forehead and his mouth. I heard her scream, and she ran downstairs because she saw someone. That's what I'm pretty sure she said. Someone's here, and she screamed and just ran downstairs. And I called for her name, but I jumped up and locked my door because I was so scared. And then I heard someone in the bathroom, and I heard her crying, and I heard some guy say that you're going to be okay, I'm going to help you. And I kept calling her name, but she wasn't answering. And then I opened the door for a second, and I saw this guy, and he was not insanely tall, but he was wearing all black and like this mask that was just covering his forehead and his mouth.
She survives because she stays hidden, but 4 of her friends would never see the sunrise. The next morning, when police arrive after the 911 call, the scene is described as the worst some officers had ever seen. Blood everywhere, 4 lifeless bodies, and no obvious trace of the killer. For 6 endless weeks, the Moscow community lives in absolute terror. Who did this? And more importantly, why? Parents are afraid to send their children to university. Students sleep with baseball bats under their beds. Everyone is a suspect. Meanwhile, police work in silence on 2 crucial elements they keep secret: a K-bar knife sheath found next to Maddie Mogen's body. On the leather strap, there's unknown male DNA. And a white car, a Hyundai Elantra, filmed by surveillance cameras leaving the King Road neighborhood at 4:20 a.m. This car had been seen prowling the neighborhood multiple times before the murders. The driver seemed to be observing, studying, planning. The FBI steps in and uses investigative genetic genealogy, the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer. They find a match. On December 30th, 2022, barely 5 days after Christmas, everything changes. In a quiet Pennsylvania home, the Kohberger family prepares to welcome the new year. Suddenly, FBI agents burst through the door, weapons drawn. They arrest Bryan Kohberger, 28 years old, a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. The man who dedicated his life to studying criminal minds is now accused of being one. The irony is chilling and terrifying. For Mel Kohberger, that morning remains the worst moment of her life. She remembers every detail with heartbreaking clarity. It's her older sister Amanda who calls. Amanda is crying, her voice trembling. "I'm with the FBI," she says simply. Mel feels her heart stop. "Why?" she asks, already terrified of the answer. "Bryan's been arrested," Amanda says. "Arrested for what?" Mel insists. There's a terrible silence. Then Amanda drops the words that will destroy their world. The Idaho Murders. Mel first thinks it's a very bad joke. It's impossible, totally impossible. Then reality hits her like a freight train. Nausea rises, overwhelming. Her brother, her little brother Bryan, accused of massacring 4 students. How is this possible? Just days before Christmas, their mother had made Bryan's favorite vegan cookies. They'd played TV game shows, laughed together like a normal family. Mel had even cut herself on aluminum foil while cleaning up after dinner. Bryan had seemed disgusted and almost panicked at the sight of blood on her finger. He'd helped her clean the cut and put on a bandage. He'd been caring, almost too sensitive to the sight of blood. And now he's accused of stabbing 4 people in a frenzy of violence, of turning a house into a scene of carnage. The contrast is so brutal that Mel cannot comprehend it. She refuses to comprehend it. But here's where the story becomes even more terrifying, even more surreal. In the weeks following the murders, before Bryan's arrest, Mel was worried about him. She knew her brother liked to jog late at night, sometimes after midnight. She knew he was the type of person to leave his doors unlocked, naive and trusting. A killer was on the loose just miles from Bryan's apartment in Pullman, Washington. So Mel did what any loving sister would do. She called her brother to protect him. "Bryan," she told him urgently, "you're running outside at night and this psycho killer is on the loose. Please be careful." Bryan took the time to reassure her. He thanked her for worrying about his safety. He promised he'd be careful, that he'd pay attention. At that precise moment, Mel didn't know she was talking to the killer himself. She was warning the danger about the danger. The icy irony of that conversation still haunts Mel today. How can you warn someone to beware of himself? How could Bryan listen to his sister's concerns, knowing he was the one she feared? But that wasn't the only time Bryan played this twisted game. Mel remembers that once, during a phone conversation, Bryan mentioned that police were still looking for the Idaho killer. He talked about it as if he were simply a concerned observer. What Mel didn't know at the time was that Bryan's phone revealed a disturbing obsession. He constantly monitored the news about the Idaho murders. He read every article, watched every true crime show that mentioned the case. He followed the investigation as closely as the investigators themselves, perhaps more closely. He knew exactly what police knew, what they were looking for, and what they still didn't know. It was a game for him, a dangerous game where he always stayed one step ahead. When the nationwide alert was issued for a white Hyundai Elantra, model 2011 to 2013, Mel briefly hesitated. Wait, didn't Bryan drive a white Elantra? But she quickly checked and reassured herself. His was a 2015 model, not the one being sought. She dismissed this troubling coincidence. She wouldn't imagine that her brother could be involved in something so horrible. The truth was too monstrous to contemplate. To truly understand Bryan Kohberger, we need to go back to his difficult adolescence. Mel describes a young Bryan who struggled with obesity, school bullying, and deep loneliness. Other students mocked him mercilessly. He was isolated, rejected, invisible to his peers. This pain pushed him toward a terrifying escape: heroin. The addiction seized him with devastating force. He stole to fund his dependency. He even stole Mel's cell phone to sell it and buy drugs. The Kohberger family watched their son, their brother, destroy himself day by day. Desperate and terrified, they made a difficult decision. They called the police on their own son. They feared he would die of an overdose if they didn't intervene. This intervention literally saved Bryan's life. He entered rehab. He fought, struggled, and finally conquered his addiction. It was a monumental victory. Bryan returned to school, determined to rebuild his life. We were all extremely proud of him, Mel confides to the New York Times, because he had overcome so much. Bryan earned his bachelor's degree at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. Then he was accepted into a prestigious PhD program in criminology at Washington State University. He studied criminal minds, killers' motivations, the psychology of violence. The family saw in him a young man who had not only survived, but was thriving. He had a bright future ahead of him. But something dark, something twisted, was growing beneath this facade of success, something no one in his family could see. We're uncovering the double life of a PhD student turned killer. If you want more deep dives like this, hit the subscribe button now. Mel readily admits that Bryan wasn't easy. He could be abrasive, cutting, socially awkward in his interactions. She attributes many of these traits to his level 1 autism diagnosis, what used to be called Asperger's syndrome. This diagnosis, according to her, explains his apparent coldness during his court appearances. Observers saw a man with a marble face, no visible emotion. They interpreted this as a sign of psychopathy, a complete lack of remorse. But Mel insists on a crucial point. Bryan has always struggled to express his emotions conventionally. It's not that he doesn't feel anything, it's that he doesn't know how to show it to others. Emotional expression isn't natural for him. Mel recounts that she and Bryan argued frequently, sometimes violently. During one particularly intense dispute, she physically tried to push him out of the house. Bryan reacted not with violence, but by simply restraining her hands. He de-escalated the situation calmly, methodically. Mel states that she never, absolutely never, knew her brother as someone physically violent. But then, how to reconcile this image with that of a man who admitted to stabbing 4 people to death in an orgy of violence? It's a question that tortures Mel every day. July 2nd, 2025 marked a turning point no one really expected. Bryan Kohberger, who had pleaded not guilty at his arrest and maintained his innocence for months, made a spectacular reversal. In a crowded courtroom, before the victims' families, he accepted a plea agreement. 4 counts of first-degree murder with premeditation, 1 count of aggravated burglary. In exchange for this confession, prosecutors removed the death penalty from the table. Judge Stephen Hippler methodically asked the ritual questions. "Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?" he asked. "Yes," Bryan answered in a voice. "Did you, on November 13th, 2022, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?" "Yes." "Did you do so willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice. Yes. Each yes was like another stab wound for the families present. On July 23, 2025, Judge Hippler formally pronounced the sentence: 4 consecutive life sentences with absolutely no possibility of parole. Bryan Kohberger will never leave prison. He will die behind bars. Bryan's mother and his sister Amanda were present at the sentencing hearing. On the table in front of Bryan, there was a strange drawing that caught the media's attention. A dark heart on a piece of paper. Journalists called it sinister and creepy. Mel now reveals the truth behind this drawing. She drew that heart, in color, vibrant, and full of life. She gave it to Bryan's lawyers to pass on to him. It was her message: I still love you. We're not abandoning you. But when it was photocopied to give to Bryan, it became black and white. A symbol of familial love transformed into something disturbing by context and circumstances. For Mel and the entire Kohberger family, Bryan's guilty plea brought no peace, no clarity. On the contrary, it deepened their confusion and pain. It's confusing, it's painful, Mel says, it's like being victimized, but not really being a victim. The Kohberger family now lives what psychologists call courtesy stigma, or stigma by association. They did nothing wrong personally, but their family name is now synonymous with horror, massacre, nightmare. Mel was supposed to start a job as a mental health counselor. She'd worked hard to obtain her qualifications. But after Bryan's arrest, her future employer was overwhelmed with calls, emails, inquiries about her. People wanted to know if she was safe to be around. She had to abandon this professional opportunity. Someone even published a book under the name Melissa J. Kohberger to financially capitalize on the case's notoriety. The family has been scrutinized mercilessly online, harassed on social media. Insane conspiracy theories circulate, accusing them of knowing, hiding evidence, being complicit. Mel is absolutely categorical on this point. I've always been someone who stands up for what's right and speaks up. If I'd ever had the slightest reason to believe my brother had done anything, I would have turned him in immediately. She recalls the case of David Kaczynski, Ted Kaczynski's brother, the famous Unabomber. When David recognized his brother's writing in the published manifesto, he turned him in to the FBI. It was the right thing to do, no matter how heartbreaking. Mel states she would have done exactly the same if she'd had concrete evidence. The moral dilemma of the Kohberger family is deeply heartbreaking and complex. How do you continue to love someone who committed the unthinkable? Is supporting Bryan a betrayal of the victim's memory? Is talking to him, loving him, not completely disowning him, being complicit in his crimes? Mel has found her own answer to these impossible questions. She programmed the names and birthdays of the 4 victims into her digital calendar. Each year, she'll receive a reminder of these lost lives. Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin. She will never forget them. The Kohbergers' mother prays daily for the victims' families. She carries their pain in her heart every moment. Everything we're going through absolutely doesn't compare to what these families have endured and continue to endure, Mel repeats several times in her interview with insistence. She wants this to be perfectly clear. The real victims are these 4 young people and their shattered families. The Kohberger family stays in regular contact with Bryan in prison. They talk to him on the phone, they write to him, they support him. But there's one subject they never, absolutely never talk about: the murders. Lieutenant Darren Gilbertson of the Idaho State Police has monitored and listened to these phone conversations. He describes them as surreal and almost bizarre in their banality. It was always about completely trivial things, he explains, with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. Always. Here's what we'll do when he gets out. Here's the food he'll cook when he gets out. Here's the baseball game we'll go see together when he gets out. How's the dog? How are your studies? Never a word about the victims. Never a question about what really happened. As if Bryan would actually get out someday, resume his normal life. Is this complete denial of reality? Or is it simply a family refusing to completely lose their son and brother, no matter what he's done? This Christmas, 2025, was particularly painful for the Kohberger family. Bryan wasn't there, locked up in a high-security Idaho prison, more than 2,500 miles from his family. But even in their sadness, Mel constantly reminds herself to put things in perspective. The families of Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan have an empty chair at their table forever. "That thought makes me so emotional I can barely talk to you about it without crying," she confides, her voice breaking. On Bryan's birthday last November, the family prepared a cake. Bryan, on the phone from his cell, requested something his sister Amanda would particularly like. Even for his own birthday, he thought about pleasing someone else. Mel blew out the candles for him, thousands of miles away, a ghost celebration filled with deep sadness and guilt that will never disappear. The story of Bryan Kohberger raises philosophical and psychological questions that haunt us all. How does someone who dedicates their life to studying criminals become one? How does a loving brother, a son who triumphed over addiction and rebuilt his life, transform into a mass murderer? Mel and Bryan shared a deep interest in criminal psychology and true crime. They watched documentaries about serial killers together. They discussed motivations, psychological profiles, investigation techniques. Mel would never have imagined in her worst nightmares that her brother would go from studying crimes to committing them. Judge Hippler stated at sentencing that we would probably never know Bryan's true motive. "Even if I could legally force him to speak, which is impossible, how could we be assured that what he said would be the truth?" he asked rhetorically. Prison phone conversations reveal a Bryan Kohberger who talks about baseball, food, impossible future plans, but never remorse, never explanations, never reasons. Police still haven't established a clear and definitive motive. They found no direct link between Kohberger and the victims on social media. The knife used to commit the murders has never been found, despite extensive searches. So many crucial questions remain unanswered, and probably always will. For Mel Kohberger, the pain is double and heartbreaking. She mourns the brother she knew and loved, the one who had overcome so many obstacles, and simultaneously, she must accept the terrifying reality of what he became. The family is still trying to reconcile the brother and son they knew with the man who pleaded guilty to brutally murdering 4 innocent young people. She explains with despair. It's an identity fracture impossible to repair, a wound that will never heal. How do you continue to love someone who committed the irreparable? How do you honor the victim's memory while refusing to completely abandon a family member? These questions have no good answers. The Kohberger family remained completely silent for 3 long years. They didn't want to do anything, say anything, that could add to the already unbearable trauma of the victims' families. But now, Mel has chosen to speak. She wants people to understand a simple but important truth. They knew absolutely nothing about what Bryan was planning or committing. They were in no way complicit in his actions. They are, in their own way, collateral victims of his violence. The Bryan Kohberger case reminds us of a dark truth we often prefer to ignore. Violent crimes don't just destroy the direct victims and their families. They also annihilate the families of those who commit these crimes. They tear apart entire communities, leaving scars that will never fade. Mel Kohberger now carries a burden she neither chose nor deserved. She is the Idaho killer's sister. A label, a stigma she'll carry until the end of her life. Like David Kaczynski, the Unabomber's brother, who changed his name to escape the weight of association. Like the families of Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, all these monsters who were once someone's sons, brothers, friends. Bryan Kohberger is now serving 4 consecutive life sentences in Idaho's maximum security correctional institution. He will never, ever leave prison. He'll only see his family through glass during monitored and recorded visits. He'll age and die behind those concrete walls. The families of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin continue to mourn their lost children every day. They try to find meaning in this senseless loss, to rebuild their shattered lives. And the Kohberger family continues to wonder, day after day how they could have missed the signs, how the brother who innocently jogged late at night became the one who stalked a house in darkness, how the criminology student who studied serial killer profiles crossed the line to become one himself, how the one they loved and supported wore a mask so perfect they never saw the monster underneath. These questions will probably remain forever without satisfying answers. But Mel Kohberger's poignant story reminds us of a crucial lesson. Behind every atrocious crime, there are more victims than those we immediately see. There are broken families on both sides of the equation. There are lives irreparably destroyed in all directions. And there are existential questions that will always haunt us. How does someone become a monster capable of such violence? And how can those who loved them continue to live with this heartbreaking reality? Justice has been served in this case. Bryan Kohberger will pay for his crimes until his last breath. But the scars, the pain, the questions, they remain forever. This has been KARMA Courtroom Files. Remember, justice was served, but the scars remain.